After the demise of Shredder, the Purple Dragons and the Foot Clan entered his own clan gang war in the control of the city of New York. The leader of the Purple Dragons, Han, felt he only thought that the Foot Clan, along with during the leadership of Shredder, only used them for his own personal gain. And now when he is gone, he was able to kick the Foot Clan out of New York, and he gave order to his gang to make sure that the Foot Clan are leaving. And after a series of battles against the Foot Clan and the Purple Dragons, even though that Oroku Karaki, wanted to remain, but the other Foot Clan decided it was not worth to continue the fighting at this gang war with the Purple Dragons. So they all left New York, leaving Karaki the only Foot Clan member left in New York. And even though after Karaki was the only one left, Han felt he had won this gang war. Despite that when Karaki remained, she continued to fight against the Purple Dragons on her own. For at least another few months after that the rest of the clan had just left. She managed to fight against the Purple Dragons alone, but even her luck when one day ran out, and that one evening it did. She was fighting against several of the Purple Dragons gang members when Purple Dragon's leader Han and his second-in-command, Dragonface, showed up with more of the gang members, and she was now outnumbered. Before the other joined, there was only four other gang members when she was fighting, but now there was the rest of them, almost like 20, and she knew she was outnumbered. But she would not give up hope. She would not give up fighting against the Purple Dragons, despite knowing she would not win. Han gave the orders to other gang members to attack her, despite knowing that she might be able to hurt them even seriously, but he didn't even care. He wanted her hurtedly, badly injured, or even dead. But as the fighting was getting closer and closer to her, she managed to knock down at least a couple of other Purple Dragons before the others managed to attack her from behind, and she was knocked down to the ground, unconscious. And the Purple Dragon gangs, just stopped. They would only looked at her, laughing that she was a big joke, since she used to be the second-in-command of Shredder. And now as she's alone, she isn't that tough anymore. But they didn't know. The turtles were on the building on top of them, seeing this happening. And even they had Casey with them. The others wanted to just leave and said, even Raphael said, this is her own gain. This is her own fail. This is her own failure. And they shouldn't even get involved in this. But except from that one though, Leo. He refused to even leave her, despite she is a defenseless and that even though she is a very skilled ninja. She was being taught at the same ninjutsu as Shredder had been teaching her, as Splinter had trained him and his brothers. But Leo, he refused to even leave. And even though that Donatello and Michelangelo, they all agreed they should fight and help her, despite that she is one of their enemies once. Even Casey was a bit first against. He was even with on Raphael's side. But after they both all realized that this short discussion, they realized they had to do something because Han was about walking up to Karaki with a gun. If they hadn't even done anything, he would have shot her to death. They all jumped down from the building, and after only a few minutes of battling, several of the gang members of the Purple Dragons was knocked down, even including Han and the Dragonface. The others, they were running away. When Donatello looked at Karaki, he realized she was seriously injured, but even Leo asked him if she would make it, and he said yes. But then was the one discussing where to take her. They first carried her away and went to some different location because then Leo asked the others what to do. But Raphael, he mentioned they shouldn't even take her back to their lair because despite that she used to be the enemy. But the others were not even convinced what to do. Michelangelo, he said, well, if we should be taken to a safe place, at least. Even though Casey was almost like divided over to bring him back to the turtle's home, or just leave her maybe at the hospital, which Raphael suggested. But they were far away though. The hospital was only a couple of miles away from where we are, and even the closest things that was closest to the place where they could be safe was in fact April O'Neill's apartment. Even though Leo suggested this, the others were shocked about this idea, leaving one of those big enemy at the hand of one of those closest allies, one of the most closest friends, April. Despite that she might be injured, she could still do some harm to April. But it was the only thing that she could do. So they all agreed to do this. Casey took her on his arms and they walked to April's apartment. Even when they knocked on the door, April was still awake, even despite it was 3 in the morning. She was a little bit tired though when she heard the knocking. She was so surprised to see Casey, Leo, and Raphael, and including Karaki in Casey's arms. They asked if they could come in because who knows on their neighbors were hearing that they'd seen them, so she let them inside. Casey put Karaki on April's bed, and the others were waiting in the living room. They were talking. April was demanded to know why they bring her to her apartment, and rather from the police station or hospital for all places. Even Raphael was even agreed, but I couldn't use to live for at the police station. After all, she's a criminal. But Leo said she's deserved a chance to be redeemed herself. After all, she had stopped fighting against them several times in the past, and she had even proven to helping them in several occasions. But Raphael said that was only her as an act. Even though the others were divided, even Raphael wouldn't even believe any of this. He doesn't even want to do. But after they discussed back and forward, they all agreed to let Karakai stay there, except for April, who was not very happy about this idea. After all, they didn't even know how things would react. But Casey promised he could stay behind as protection to April. Even though April was not very happy about that idea, but she luckily agreed to have him. So she decided to sleep on the couch while he sat on the armchairs next, having his hockey stick with him just in case. He promised to be awake most of the night, but unlikely that didn't happen though, because just shortly after the others left and that April fell asleep, he did also fall asleep. Even back on the way to the lair, Raphael still demanded to know exactly why they just left their one of the enemies at the back of their April's apartment, despite having Casey. But even though Casey wasn't even well trained in any sort of martial art like they are, that he still but Raphael said also it was a very stupid idea, but Leo mentioned. Despite that Casey perhaps was not even trained in the same martial arts scale and style as they are, but he has been proven to be very skilled in fighting. After all, before he met them, he was fighting the purple dragons on his own, just with a hockey stick and other things. So, even though Raphael was just angry and reluctant, but luckily agreed to do so, but he was still getting worried. What if that Karakai would harm April and even Casey? So he said to Leo, if something would happen to April or Casey, It was be his from his this would be his fault if they end up seriously injured. And even though Leo took this responsibility on his conscience, even though Leo was very even himself was even having doubts, but if that Oroku Karaki could ever be redeemed, but he wanted to have this big hope for that. And the next morning, Karakai wakes up and she sees that she's in bed, but she realized she was. Then she remembered exactly what happened last night. She was in a fight against the purple dragons, and now she's in a bed in an apartment somewhere. How did she even get there? Did someone find her? And who find her? She decided to move, but just then she felt such pain in her chest. She may have been several, at least couple of ribs broken. She tried to step up, but she realized her leg, part of her leg was also hurting, but she managed to at least get out the bedroom and entered the living room where she sees Casey, April, asleep. But as she was walking, she was pain, stunned and moaning of pain. Casey, though, he immediately wakes up and looks at her, but she realized she was not in a shape of fighting. April also quickly wakes up, and sees that Oroku stands there in the bedroom doorway. As she was just standing for only a few seconds before, the pain in her right leg was too much. She fell to the ground, to the floor, on her knees. Even though when Casey and April walked up to her, despite Casey was just wanting to be ready to be hurting the fight, if this came to that, because he didn't know if this was just an act or was real pain. April asked if she was okay, if she needed any help with something, even though that Karakai would not even respond to that. But despite having such severe pain, she tried to stand, but she couldn't. April actually then scooped up under her arm and managed to take her to the couch and ask her if she needed anything. They can take her to the hospital if they wanted. But she actually refused to even go there. Then, but since April had some medical training, or at least basic understanding of first aid, she went to find the first aid kit, while Casey was guarding her, just in case. Even though that Karakai didn't even speak. She didn't even ask why they even bring her there after a few seconds though. Casey explained they actually found her in the alley when she was fighting the purple dragons, and they brought her here to keep her safe. She was laughing. Why would they save their enemy rather than her die in the alley? But she wasn't that seriously injured, he said, but also a smirk. And then April came back and helped Karakai with the injuries. April said to Casey that he could leave. She would take over from there. But even though that Casey wouldn't leave, April demanded him to leave because now it's daytime. She will look after Karakai by her own. The others can come back later in the evening when it's safer for them to be there. So even though despite Casey wanted to leave, but he didn't want to fight against April's mood at that moment, so he left. Rather than going home though, he went he went through the turtles' home, and when they came there, they all fell awake. They demanded to know exactly what happened that night. Casey explained that he had fallen asleep first after April, and Raphael was a little bit pissed about that, but as far as nothing had happened to April, after they realized April was completely alone with her. But Casey said that she wasn't even conditioned to fight at all. She had severely pain in her right leg, broken ribs, and even some bruises. She was not even any remotely conditioned to fight against anyone, and especially April. And even that, April would be easy to be able to defend her against Karakai's current condition. Back at April's apartment, She did wanted to know exactly what will she happen to her now. Is she is captive or their prisoner? But April said that she isn't their enemy or their prisoner. She is free to go whenever she wants. Even though that she just wants to say that she's safe and that she's okay. Even though when April went to the kitchen, Karakai tried to leave, but the pain in her leg was too severe for her to even do so. She could even barely stand for only a few seconds before the pain came back. Karakai was actually such pain, so she had decided to stay there until she's at least healed enough to be able to walk on her own. And that wouldn't take for another week or so, even though despite having this. But at least she know she is safe. And the other purple dragons won't even know where she is. And that gave her some some relief. Because she told herself once she back to full health, she would find the purple dragons and keep fighting against them. And perhaps even try to reach out to the Foot Clan to ask them to come back so they could continue and fight and take over the city. Even though that when after all this happened, she wanted to know exactly why the purple dragons were not being able to easily defeat April. She told Karakai when she heard all about this, and she said, "It's not worth to keep fighting when you're alone. You know that." I mean, she also told her there was no point for her to fighting against the entire gang on her own. Even though when she knew that Karakai may not been able to fight against their entire next time, it will perhaps even get worse. Or she may able to be killed by Han earlier, or he could be killing her as the moment they sees her. And there is very likely they're still out there at the moment looking for her, which was right. April was right about that. Because the same moment as she was talking to Karakai, the purple dragon was out on the streets looking for any signs of any of Karakai anywhere. Since the city was a big city of 9 million people, it was like looking around a needle in a haystack. After 4 days of searching for Karakai, Han gave up gave up on finding her and continued to leading the purple dragons in their normal criminal ways. Even after that same evening when the turtles, came back, they wanted to know exactly what happened, if April was even safe. As they walked in there, they actually seen Karakai, April sit on the couch and talk, having some tea and just talking. They were just talking about some things of why she didn't leave the Foot Clan earlier, or when she tried to find her parents in the first place, maybe reach out to them again. After that, April learned that her parents abandoned her when she was very young, and that Shredder found her and helped her look after her, raising her as if she was her own, his own. Even that she probably would even know that Shredder doesn't even have any sort of feelings for Karakai. Not even like parent feelings for that any sort of feelings at all. Even though the others but the turtles, they wanted to demand to know exactly where the rest of the Foot Clan were. But she said that they were gone. They left the town, forever. But even though the others were actually starting believing that, but Raphael, he said, I don't believe it. They're probably somewhere in hiding, somewhere in the outside the skirts of town, or perhaps in the underground, waiting for the perfect moment to strike against the purple dragons. But then Donatello said, "Look, Raphael, if the Foot Clan are, as you're saying, waiting for the right moment, they should have even done it by now. They have been missing for months after all this happened. Even they aren't in here anymore, you realize they're probably gone. And even though that after all has happened, even after Karakai had made full recovery, April asked her what she wanted to do now, wherever she want to go, but even April herself has no idea what's going to happen because Karakai has still no idea where to go. Since she has no home of her own, April actually offered her place for Karakai to stay as long as she wanted. Even despite her friends not was a little bit happy about the idea, but so far, even after Karakai had made recover, she haven't done any signs of harming April or even leaving without knowing her. She haven't tried to escape. In fact, Karakai actually started showing regret of her old past. She tried to convince April and the others that she had been trying to redeem herself. Even when she was trying to even offered her help to Donatello to work on his machines in the warehouse where he actually works. Even despite having some mechanical skills herself, even though that even Donatello wasn't even really trustworthy to believe in that. But after that she had proven his skills, even her offer, so he decided to take that and agreed. And as they did, he was actually very impressed of her skills in mechanics. And she even offered herself her service to help them training in fighting skills. Even though Raphael was not very happy about this, but she then offered her herself to be his sparring partner in a fight, a more friendly battle fights against him. In that, he took off. He accepted the offer, and after several fightings against him in a sparring match, she was actually very skilled fighter, and he actually started to like her because they had the purpose. They're equals strong in the fights, and for that she had actually gained his trust, and slowly the others also. But there was one thing though. Despite the others had given her full trust and even believed her, she was considered them as a friend. But there was some deep parts of them start wondering if this was just another act of her. But she hasn't even shown any signs of going back to her criminal ways, because at the time when she's staying in April's apartment when she's away, the others has put up a sort of camera just in case to see what's happening. Even April was actually aware of this, but Case Karakai hadn't even shown any signs of doing anything danger or any criminal activity in the apartment. All she did was just talking to herself, maybe read some books or watch some TV, cooking for herself, but that was basically it. And after about 2 months of that, they took away the camera and. But one evening, when Karakai and April were sitting on the couch watching some TV, they were actually watching this romance movie, and the topic of finding a special someone came up between them. Karakai did mention that she had some hopes, but while she was back in the Foot Clan, she actually had some hope to maybe find someone to be with, or at least someone special she could feel sort of connection to. But since the other Foot Clans only had criminal mind in their thoughts, so the only thing that she did was actually then decide to leave, want to leave, but it wasn't that easy, because Shredder would not have even allowed her, his second in command, just to leave the clan like that. So, but now he was gone, and the Foot Clan was gone. She was free. She was able to live her own life. But there was only one person that she could trust, and had even started to like some more and more. And that person was in fact April. She had started to like her more as a friend. But she was very scared how April would react. Because as they were watching this movie, April was leaning against her, and suddenly they looked at each other, and Karakai kissed April. April looked at her, and even Karakai started wondering if she had done that bad thing and tried to make some excuse, but April leaned forward and kissed Karakai once again on her own. It turned out April had started to like her even more, but they didn't know exactly how to take all of this. April loved a Karakai, and Karakai loved April. So they decided maybe it was meant them to be. But there was one other thing. How would they tell this to their friends? Especially the turtles that seemed to be almost closer to April than anything else. They probably get happy, but mostly shocked. So April decided to wait to the right moment to tell them out that she and Karakai are dating now. And especially she didn't have no idea how they would react. They probably could be either happy for them or totally shocked and even furious and demanded that Karakai leave April and never return and leave New York or something like that. That was something that April had her mind. But despite that, April wanted to know exactly how her friends would react. And when she went to see them only a few days after that, she and Karakai had entered a new relationship. She asked them, but just randomly, what would they react if she would had, as an example, end up in a relationship with Karakai. And at first, it was silent. Even Michelangelo asked if this was a random question or if she meant this as for reality, and she meant if it would happen for real, how would they all take it? Would they accept it or hate her or perhaps demanded Karakai to leave New York for good? At first, the turtles were looking at each other, and well, they were not even expecting this kind of questioning in the first place. But Leo, he said, well, as long as you're happy, we were happy before you. Despite knowing her, even when she is a friend of ours now, but we were a little bit, we would be startled for sure. Even Splinter mentioned, though, he would be excited, he would be happy for April that found someone, and even though that Karakai actually had showed to redeem himself. The others were actually happy, at least Donatello, he would accept it. Michelangelo, also. But Casey and Raphael, they were a little bit skeptical about it, but it seems if they seem able to be happy with someone, like Karakai, they as long as she is keeping her safe, and they were happy for her. So she took a deep breath and then mentioned that April and Karakai actually have been dating for about a week or two. That didn't actually surprise them, but they were actually happy. And then Michelangelo said, well, if this happened, let's party! And the everyone was laughing about that, but they actually just happy for April to have found someone like Karakai. And at least, but Leo did mention, at least if someone were trying to hurt her, if we are around, she had her kind of a personal bodyguard. Even Raphael actually liked that idea. If they weren't even near close by to save April from any harm, she would have a girlfriend like Karakai, who is a trained martial arts, like her friends, been able to save and protect April from any harm. And even April smiled about that idea. Well, she wouldn't call Karakai as her personal bodyguard, but she liked the idea that she would have someone if the turtles wasn't even able to help her with something, but Karakai would have been there to help her or protect her from any harm. When she mentioned this to Karakai, she just laughed and said she would do anything to protect April from any harm. But one day, when April and Karakai went on the street, just walking back to her apartment, they actually ran into Dragonface and three other of the purple dragons. And they immediately recognized Karakai, but they refused to do anything about it because they actually had stopped looking for her. And to their mind, since she has been doing nothing against them, she hasn't even hurting, hasn't even attacking them for months. And even when they mentioned this to Han, he gave the order to ignore her, since she hasn't been ignoring them for all this time. It was not even worth to continue hiding her. So did they? So they just forget about her. Even despite knowing that April one day would have to start something else though. April one evening when she talked to Karakai what she had seen herself in the future, what she wanted to do, and she actually said that she wanted to have a family one day of her own. So April and Karakai, they were just talking about some of their potential future, maybe marriage, children, and in fact, even though Karakai had asked Leo, Donatello, and Splinter for help, she had actually been planning to propose to April. She wanted to have some special planning if they could help her or give her some advice on how to do it. Since it was actually the very first time Michelangelo, when he heard about this, he said, well, if you want an idea, watch the movies. That's the help. Even though Karakai just rolled her eyes and said, I had seen several movies, Michelangelo, but I don't know. I want them to be special. Even though Splinter only gave her one advice: be yourself and find a good spot, perhaps in the park during the day, and for one spot that'd be perfect. The others agreed one place would have been perfect, in the center of Central Park. Even though that in a couple of days after this, April and Karakai went to the park to have just a walk to there when she asked April to close her eyes, and she did. And April had no idea what was going to happen. When she opened it, she saw the ring, and just before even Karakai could even ask a question, April started to cry and said yes. And when they told their friends, including the turtles, they were overjoyed. Even though that they actually were invited to the wedding. Even though April and Karakai was just happy to be married with each other. But after the wedding though, April announced she's moving from her apartment. Because now she's married with Karakai, they will probably had to need some bigger apartment. Maybe two bedrooms instead. And the other turtles was just looking asking why two rooms? Karakai mentioned that they will have one more person to live with them within the next few months. They asked who? A friend of them? Both shook their heads and said, no, our adopted daughter. It turned out, just before the wedding, or just shortly after the wedding, Karakai and April went to this local orphanage in town and signed some papers, and they were actually adopting a daughter who was about 10 years old, and they were happy to do so because next couple of months later, their the adoptions were approved, and the daughter was living with them now. April had actually wanted to introduce her new daughter to her friends, But even Karakai was a little bit skeptical how the daughter would react to see the turtles, because she was 10 years old. She probably didn't think they're monsters and trying to hurt her or eating her. But even after trying, they actually told the daughter about their special friends, but she had to promise not to scream because they would even hurt her. Because she can told April actually told her daughter that she had been helping them for years, been fighting with them by their side by side against criminals, bad guys. When the daughter by the name Annie was actually met the turtles for the first time, she wasn't even scared. She actually liked them, and especially Michelangelo, who she called herself as her big brother or godfather, even or she actually didn't call her that. That was something that the others were expecting, but she called her Uncle Mike. And the others were actually some like uncle to her, but her favorite was in fact Michelangelo, because he likes to party and play games. That was something that they actually bonded over better. Even that was a big relief for both Karakai and April to knowing that their daughter actually liked them rather than being scared. And at least it was a positive side, not having a terrified daughter who's terrified of humanoid turtles who can talk. But she liked them. Even liked Splinter, who she called Grandpa. Even that made Splinter smile and cry a little bit, seeing that even though despite their other turtles and Splinter act as in fact as a family to April, they are the closest thing as a family. Even having supposed an adopted granddaughter made Splinter very excited, but most of all happy. Even after that they had adopted and had adopted Annie 2 years ago, 2 years earlier, but 2 years later they adopted a son, a boy by the name Ryan. Ryan, he was more like liking Raphael and Leo. They were just excited to have someone that they called Uncle Raphael or Uncle Raph and Uncle Leo, and even Casey liked him, and he actually called him Uncle Casey. And despite having this great family, both Case, Karakai and April was just excited for all of this happened. And even despite all those years ago when her friends brought Karakai to her apartment, she could not even imagine the life would change for her life after all this. And especially for Karakai, she would not even expect to have fallen in love with one of her old enemies, especially April. She probably had thought herself, if she wasn't even injured enough, she would probably attacked her, but she was grateful she didn't do that. She was just happy to have been with someone like April who actually looked after her after all this happened. Despite knowing how much April meant to Karakai. And Karakai, though, she could not have been happier to have found someone like April O'Neil to call herself as her wife, and for that she could not have been happier. Even April, she was really excited and happy to have found Karakai and was even willing to give her a second chance like Leo to be redeem her from her criminal past. Even though some deep down in April's mind, maybe that maybe that Karakai couldn't or wanted or didn't want to be redeemed. But after showing that she was willing to do so, she was just excited and happy that Karakai actually had redeemed herself and was just happy to do so. And even their relationship after all of after they became started living together, It was a little bit rocky at first, but after time, they were just happy to have found the true soulmate. And this is how Urukai and April O'Neil found a true love and got a family together. The end.